Lesli Linka Glatter, director and executive producer of Love and Death. I know after you read the Texas Monthly articles about this case, you thought if this wasn't true, you can't make it up because no one would believe it. And I agree because there's a lot of surreal elements to this story. But what to you was the most implausible detail?
I it's hard to find one. Let me put it that way. I mean, when I read the articles, I almost thought it was fiction. And the fact is, it's not fiction at all. It is all based on a true story. And it's what amazes me about real life. It is so often stranger than fiction, anything you could come up with. I mean, it really goes from the beginning of, you know, you think you're going to fill up the hole in your heart and psyche with having an affair, you know, and then you pick the most unlikely person to have that affair with, you know, someone who is not like the hot guy. You pick, you know, someone who happens to be the friend or your friend's husband that you stand next to in choir. Like all of that is like, really? And then they talk about it for months and months, you know, and it's like that just beginning. I was like, how could that be true? But it was true. They put up the do's and don'ts of how you can have a successful, you know, adulterous affair on butcher paper as they ate lasagna in Candy's kitchen, you know, all of those details. But, you know, and it literally went from the beginning to end to the horror of what the murder is, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that tonal shift I was really interested in as well. But I have to say, I'm always interested in complicated, layered characters, oftentimes women, but I'm very interested in men, male characters. But in this case, you know, I happen to grow up in Texas. And there is something about the big spaces, the big sky, the land of possibility juxtaposed with what's going on underneath the surface. And all of that was really intriguing to me. I
Mm-hmm.
think I've never told a story in Texas. You know,
Oh, really? Huh.
nope, nope, never told a Texas story and never shot in Texas. And it was a great experience.
So you get two birds, one stone with this one.
Two
So
birds with
mhm.
one stone. Yeah.
I do love that what you were saying about the wide open spaces, and then you also feel it in contrast to the loneliness of Candy's life and also Alan's too, because like they're both kind of unfulfilled in different ways. But
Exactly.
I also love the like that fitting into the duality of the show. Like you have it in the title, this ampersand connecting these two very different ideas, but it's like the duality of Candy's double life, and she and Betty are so different. And yeah, the picturesque town, but like there's more under the surface. And
Exactly.
yeah, like the tonal shift, like before the murder and after, you turn into a courtroom procedural. So what
Exactly.
kind of discussions did you and David E. Kelly have about this, like showing
Oh
these
my goodness.
two
Well, and the
halves?
great thing, you know, we had wanted to work together for many years and never had, which is really, I think for both of us, surprising, you know, and it was such a great collaboration. I mean, he was the writing showrunner, I was the directing showrunner. It was such a wonderful collaboration on every level. And we developed the story together, and he wrote all 7 hours, and we were constantly in conversation. You know, it's kind of what it should be. You know, we are intricately linked together in this process of telling stories, and that's what it was. And we talked about everything. And I think again, this idea of, you know, this is an American tragedy. It's like the cracks in the American dream. And what you said, you know, you see in the titles, it's perfect, it's gorgeous, it's, you know, the life you think you want to lead, and why is it that there's this big hole inside of you? And I think it was true with a lot of the characters, you know. And it's funny because the first things we shot in the series, which was actually very important to me, was all the scenes about community. It was all the scenes at the church. It was all of the choir, all of the singing and picnics and family. And it did create a community among the actors. And I think when you build something, then you're in a place to kind of see it, you know, disintegrate in some way. because that's kind of what happened with that community.
Yeah, and that town had never been rocked like this by murder too.
Police had never investigated a murder like this. I think it's why they were so kind of over their head in the investigation. And the neighbors were tracking evidence all through the house, and the police came in and made coffee, and there were many different departments working, and the neighbors ultimately cleaned up the horrible crime scene.
Mm-hmm. I do want to talk about the murder. I guess we could get to it now. And you show it in the finale, but we see it in flashbacks as Candy is testifying in court. And I love that you told it non-linearly, because you could have just put it in 4, but her side is the only side we know of because she's the one who survived.
Yes.
And it's also the incredibly graphic, and you've directed a lot of action, gory scenes, including my favorite, the lawnmower in Mad Men.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so can you talk about planning out that the entire scene and just the choreography of it and working with Lizzie and Lily?
Well, first of all, Lizzie and Lily are just 2 extraordinary actors and human beings. So that was an amazing experience. But, again, what you said about point of view, we only see the scene from one person's point of view, and that's the person who survived. So we don't have the objective point of view. We don't have Betty's point of view. It's not Rashomon, the amazing Akira Kurosawa film, where you see a murder, you see it from 6 point of views, and the last one is the ghost of the woman who was killed. We only see it from Candy's point of view, but we stayed very accurate to her testimony and to like what was described in the room, the book of Mother Goose Rhymes, and the kids' toilet, and the dog bowl, and choreographed the scene as it was described. And one of the things that blew me away with Lizzie as an actor, first of all, she lets you into such a deep place in her psyche.
It's her eyes.
Oh my God, it's like you can travel the universe there with all the different complications. Is that even just hearing her testify, like I shot the crime scene, the crime before we shot the testimony, but watching the day she was on the stand in the courtroom, her way of describing it, it's like you saw it, and what I felt, do you remember the old film, The Accused?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Which was, I think it was an incredible film. Jodie Foster was phenomenal, but there was a description of the most horrible rape I've ever seen. And it was so visceral that I think it was the first time I really felt the horror of what that crime is, depicted in any sort of way. And I felt, as much as I loved Candy as a character and Betty as a character, the crime that committed was a really horrible crime. And I think to back away from that would have not done the story justice. Like, this was not that picking up a gun and shooting someone is a wonderful crime. There are no good crimes, but this was a particularly gruesome crime. I mean, something must have cracked in Candy's psyche to be able to physically even do this. She was not a big woman. To lift up an axe once is a tough thing. To lift up an axe 41 times, it's almost inconceivable to me. So we did not show that. I think we maybe showed 8, 10 swings. But
well, the first big one, like splitting her head, that was just brutal.
Brutal. And that's what happened. She hit her on the back of the neck, and then she hit her in the head and thought, oh my God, that was it. But there were 39 more after that. Yeah. And to me, it's the combination of all of that. Candy caring so much about what the world saw and thought of her, how she presented herself, and what happened in that laundry room. Yeah. So I felt like it was important that it be intense, to not shy away from that, but not to to I didn't want it to be so horrifying you couldn't watch it.
Yeah, because you're trying not to sanitize it or glorify it.
That's
So
exactly
yeah.
that's exactly my point, is that I don't want to vilify or glorify in any way. But it felt like there needed to be a real reality to it, and how extreme it was.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one reason this story is, that it's hard to understand the human condition. I mean, we're such complicated beings, but this one is really inexplicable. And to try to find the why and the how of this, it's very complicated and layered. And, I hope we showed the characters in a real way, because I kind of fell in love with all of these characters.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Candy is she is not a serial killer or like a career criminal or any of these type of people you normally see in true crime, right? Like
Exactly.
so you do feel for her, like you feel like you can see that she feels trapped and unfulfilled, and there's this quiet in her life, and she the affair is more about like companionship because she feels like she's not getting that
No,
from
but
that.
that's exactly what I thought. I'm so glad you got that, because that's exactly what their relationship was. It wasn't about having
They have lunch first before sex.
lunch. They had lunch. In fact, sometimes they didn't even have sex. They just had lunch and talked about what was important to them. And they were not being seen and heard in their own relationships. So they would come to this kind of, special place where they just could have a friend. And you feel for both of them in that way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I um and I feel a lot for Betty. I mean, Betty, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, but having done a lot of research about bipolar disorder because of Homeland, I would maybe I would maybe say that Betty could have been bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
She was like the life of the party when she was younger, and something switched when she was like 19, which is very common. And, she had depression and anxiety, and it was not, no one knew how to treat it then.
Right.
Yeah.
And also and postpartum too.
Postpartum.
She thought she was
And
pregnant. So
exactly.
mhm.
Yeah. Of course, ironically, when we shot the scene where she told Jesse that she thought she might be pregnant, she was really, really pregnant. So
Lily was pregnant.
Lily was actually pregnant. And of course, the outfit she's wearing is what was described in the book, these red shorts, the little white, yellow top. And so we put her in that, and it's like the belly was there. I think that was also intense for Lizzie
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
be doing this very physical scene with her when she was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Lily was like, it's okay. I'm okay. Yeah. But
She's like, go for it.
totally went for it on an emotional level, totally physically and emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
It
Um,
was,
yeah, the finale is titled Shh, which is the trigger word for Candy, because we see in the fifth episode when she does a hypnosis
yeah,
that there was an incident in her childhood involving her mom, in the hospital, and then we see in the flashback to the crime that Betty says it to her.
exactly.
What did you make of this? The whole like hypnosis thing? Do you think this happened? It sounds like, I do agree that I think there was some like crack in her mind somehow, and that she just became a different person. So what do you
Something,
make of the whole
something,
yeah.
I don't know. Was it dissociative reaction, which is what Dr. Faison called
Mhm.
it? I mean, something had to have become unleashed, because, as you said, she did not ever murder anyone else. She did not become a serial killer. In fact, she became a family therapist. She actually, was trying to help other people. So, this was not a serial murderer. This was something that cracked open in her. I don't know if we'll ever understand what that is. It is one of those inexplicable things. But is it what Dr. Faison said? I don't know. I believe something happened. I believe he believed it. Mm-hmm. And I think the jury believed it.
Yeah. And then it also kind of goes back to when they talk about, oh, she says like, oh, they'll find me innocent. And Pat's like, oh, no, they'll just find you not guilty.
That's exactly right. She will never be innocent. Mm-hmm. The best she could be was not guilty. But I also think Candy was a character who cared, and Dr. Faison said that. She cared incredibly what other people thought of her. Mm-hmm. So she could be feeling horribly as long as everyone else thought she was fine. And I think that helped explain how she could go back to the church and pretend that things were absolutely fine, that nothing had happened, and tell the story over and over again. Because I think she might have actually wished that was what had happened.
She was like repeating it to try to make it real.
Yes. I think she could have changed what happened and block it out and make this the truth by saying it over and over. In fact, the conversation she has with Alan when he keeps calling her, and she offers to go over to Betty's house and check on her. What if Alan would have said yes?
She would have gone over. Just be like, no, I found her there.
Yes, is that so? There's something that is just,
and then the other thing is, it's like she could have, after the murder, she could have just called the police and been like, this happened, self-defense, but she takes a shower and then just goes home.
That's what she was. If she was trying to get away with it, she was absolutely terrible at it.
Yes.
I mean, she tracked, blood through the house. She took a shower. She didn't clean up, and walked out of the house. But again, the police in Wiley and that area had never dealt with a crime like this. It was a horrible crime. Mm-hmm. So it was like one, crazy mistake after another, because they would have arrested her that night.
Yeah, for sure. But the show ends with a final scene of her saying goodbye to Alan before she and the family move away. Why did you guys think it was important to include that? Because you guys could have just ended with the verdict and them driving off with the title cards too. But I found it was a nice button for her to apologize in her way and also acknowledge that she and Betty were similar too.
I felt it was so much about what was not said, and essential in some way for both of them to be able to move on. And there's so little dialogue in the scene and so much empty space, but it was about, in many ways, what was not said, but what was somehow felt and shared. And I loved that scene between the two of them and felt it was really important. Mm-hmm. And yes, we could have left it at the courtroom, but I don't feel like it would have been satisfying in some way. I also thought it was important for her, Sherry, who's played by the amazing Kristen Ritter, amazing, stood by her throughout the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And that level of friendship, I also thought was really important.
Mm-hmm. Because it's also like you guys have to imagine and create these private moments between the characters. Like the stuff you have are the facts of the case, and that you stick to. Yes. But these other moments you have to fill in yourselves. So
yes. And that was David's wonderful writing. I mean, one of the scenes that I love so much is, and we know that both Alan and Betty and Pat and Candy went to Marriage Encounter, and yes, indeed, it was set in Dunphy's Royal Inn, which was torn down, but it was a medieval themed hotel, because as a director, I would never have done that, because if it wasn't,
it sounds fake.
Sounds fake. And it could look fake, but that's where they set it. And I loved that juxtaposition between, something actually very serious going on there, where you do talk about your feelings. And yes, you've got, a medieval tapestry behind you, or a knight, in armor. But the scene between Pat and Candy, where he quotes Carole King.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the tapestry scene. Yeah, great.
I mean, that is beautifully David E. Kelley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We know that they went, but we don't know what they said in that hotel room together. And, you know, to me, it said so much about who Pat was, kind of how, like, what a good guy he was.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't really understand her, you know, but he really loves her.
Yeah, and then he also kind of apologizes to her when he finds out about the affair too. So
And gives her flowers.
yeah, flowers.
You know, like, really? Oh my goodness. I mean, we humans are so interesting in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, lastly, speaking of Pat, I know you're a big fan of his shorts, but how do
Oh,
you feel about Tom Pelphrey's tanning shorts?
well, his tanning shorts are unforgettable.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that he apparently, that character, Don Crowder, would,
When tanning.
Yep, he was into his tanning. There was a scene, not because it wasn't a great scene, but there was a scene where he had a tanning bed, in his amazing house. But, as the way one shapes things, it ended up being a bit repetitive and you wanted to move the story through, but it's like one always has to cut things that you actually love. But him laying there in those shorts with the tanning goggles and the 70s tanning light was,
Yeah, you had to choose between the tanning bed and his desk.
I know. Yeah. I mean, really,
the desk was
armadillo.
amazing.
Suzuki's design, I mean,
they found out on Facebook Marketplace. It was like unreal. So, but you need to just release like the deleted scenes so we could see the tanning
totally
bed.
there's one deleted scene that I love so much, but it was stopping the energy of the story going forward. So I will think of those scenes all the time, the ones that you have to cut that you loved, that it's always
yeah.
Right. But how amazing is he?
Incredible. He just comes, like, steals the show in the back half. Courtroom Dawn. Yeah.
Oh my God, Courtroom Dawn. And we had the Don Crowder's real law partner, Robert Udishin, on the set with us, which was incredibly helpful. And he talked about how great Tom did Don. He thought Tom might have done a better job with Don's summation than Don did.
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest compliment you can get. So it doesn't get any better.
But Robert was great. He was great about remembering wardrobe, and Audrey Fisher, the amazing Audrey Fisher. I mean, Suzuki found the desk and Audrey found this crazy coat that Candy wore that looks kind of like a blanket with stripes on it. I think she went on Etsy and scoured Etsy and found,
and it's nearly identical. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Lesli, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and congratulations on the project again.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.